I want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, goes on the end zone. Caught ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in. Here they go again, tempo mode, dropping the throw. Winston out again, throws to the left. It's intercepted at the 35. Outside the numbers to the 40, to the 35, to the 30, to the 25, to the 20, to the 15, 10. Mike Edwards, touchdown Tampa Bay. That's the dagger, my friend.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another off-season edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. The NFL Combine is here. Runs from now to the end of the week. Today was day one up there in Indianapolis. We heard from Tampa Bay Buccaneers general manager Jason Licht, head coach Todd Bowles. We got to hear who they're going to be interested in watching at the Combine this week. And some more newsworthy updates that we're going to catch you up on.
Yes, and we do have breaking news. The Buccaneers are planning to release Leonard Fournette when the new league year begins March 15th.
There we go. So I guess we kick off today's show with some breaking news. We got some other release news that we'll talk about here in a second. But thank you for breaking the news, buddy. Aside from that, how you doing, friend?
I'm doing good. Starting off right. All right. Yeah, starting off good. Yeah, it's per Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. Just tweeted out about a minute ago.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the latest here with Leonard Fournette being the latest cap casualty for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The other name on the list was Donovan Smith, who is expected to be released. That was originally reported by Scott Reynolds and Pewter Report, who was on top of the Byron Leftwich firing before it was officially reported. So, I mean, safe to say if Scott's already on it and, you know, he's sticking his neck out there, it's going to be happening. But Leonard Fournette, I don't remember the amount of money the Bucs saved with this move, but they get out of a 3-year deal with the running back who they signed just a year ago. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, something I sort of expected, I think. I think we talked about, I'm not sure if it was last show or the show before, but about Leonard Fournette and just saying, I think if Brady would have stayed, I think that really would have helped the chances of him staying. But now that Brady's gone, not a surprise that Fournette moves on here.
Yeah, and, we talked ad nauseum last week just about new offensive coordinator Dave Canales and what he can bring to this offense, but more specifically that running back position. So it'll be interesting to see how the Bucs address it. Obviously, they could spend a higher round draft pick on a running back, but maybe there's some other spots on that offense they want to try and test their luck with, so we'll have to wait and see. Let's talk about Donovan Smith. The release of him will save Tampa Bay about $9.95 million in cap space. So let's just round up and say a clean $10 million. So between that and Leonard Fournette, they're certainly well on their way to getting back over the cap before March 15th. Donovan Smith, a veteran left tackle for this team. I know a very divisive player, especially with his fumbles in recent years, but I mean, he's a guy who was, I hate to say an Iron Man for Tampa Bay, but that's what he was for a long time. He started a lot of games and didn't miss any due to injury until recent seasons. But, he's always been criticized for his play. Even before the Tom Brady era with Jameis Winston as a quarterback, people were critical of the left tackle. And seems like the Bucs are ready to move on.
Yeah, and this was another one. This was a little bit tougher than Fournette because, like I said, about how when you cut the player, you got to replace the player. In Fournette's case, they have Rachaad White there. Makes it a little bit easier, and it's probably much easier to find a running back than it is a left tackle. So this one, I'm sure, is a little bit tougher for him. Now, I mean, Pewter Report did say expected to release. So while it's not, official, it's like you said, if Scott Reynolds is reporting it, it's very, very likely to happen. He doesn't just throw that stuff out there without it being, good information. So, yeah, I mean, It was one I thought was going to be one of the tougher ones, and this is one of the tough decisions you have to make when you are as far over the salary cap as the Bucs are. So, yeah, it'd save close to $10 million. They can save like 15 if they if they get him with a post June 1 designation. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I'm not sure if they can do that while also still like cutting him right now. So, yeah, I mean, we knew it was coming, and the trims are starting to happen right now. So Jason Licht even talked today about how they're going to have to say goodbye to some of those players who helped them win the Super Bowl. And two players right now who are on that Super Bowl team or big parts of it are no longer going to be Buccaneers.
Absolutely. Something else Jason Licht got the opportunity to speak on today at the Combine was the quarterback situation. Now, we heard new offensive coordinator Dave Canales come in last week, and in his introductory presser, he spoke a lot about Kyle Trask. He had a lot of good things to say, the possibilities, the roof that Kyle has as a player, the talent that a lot of people are hoping he ends up becoming. But, you know, aside from doubling down on the idea of Kyle Trask as their QB1, Jason Licht also said today that they have every intention of bringing in some legitimate competition for Kyle Trask. He also said that maybe looking at a quarterback early in the draft is something that they're not going to rule out. So, just like we talked to you, this time a couple of weeks ago, it doesn't seem like much has changed as far as developments in the Buccaneers quarterback realm. But today, I think we're going to tally off some more names that have come into the conversation and also recap some guys that we have already mentioned. Let's shout out really quickly everyone hanging out with us here in the live chat over on YouTube. Bucs Cole Gang in the house. Truly appreciate you hanging out with us. Anyone else that we may have missed trickle in here. So, Jason Licht said today, and he kind of doubled down, and he basically said that they're fully comfortable with the idea of Kyle Trask being your quarterback one heading into week one. Now, obviously, we have to assume that still carries the context of bringing in some legitimate competition. But if Kyle Trask is your quarterback week one, it's safe to say that, in any situation, he's going to have to earn it. And the Bucs are fully aware of that. Jason Licht said that today.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It's a slippery slope because he's the only quarterback under contract right now. So, um, they're gonna say that the right things, and like you said, Jason Licht mentioned, like it's not gonna just be his job, and we've said that in the past. Like he wasn't just gonna be given the job, and say, "Hey, Kyle, you're the quarterback one." So I think that's smart. Now we'll see what level of competition it is. It could be. I mean, they've said they were going to bring in competition for Roberto Aguayo. I remember after his rookie season, and they signed a guy off a practice squad who wasn't really a big name. That wasn't really competition. It's just another body there. So is it a guy like Drew Lock as a competition, or is it a guy like Jacoby Brissett who's a competition? Two very different things there. So I'm curious to see what veteran quarterback they go out and target. I do think that you could see them draft a quarterback and sign a veteran quarterback. Now, when I say draft a quarterback, that does not mean the first round, doesn't even mean in the second or third round. But I think at some point you could see them drafting a quarterback, probably on day 3. So I think that the quarterback room could look a lot like Kyle Trask, whoever that veteran may be, and then a rookie.
Let's talk about some of the other names that have entered the conversation as far as the veteran quarterback route goes. I talked about this in a video with James earlier this week. That is former Washington quarterback Carson Wentz. Now, this is a guy we obviously saw get plenty of chances to be the starter in Philly, had some injuries hold him back. He got a chance to be the starter, started 17 games for the Indianapolis Colts, who have been a quarterback carousel in themselves. He was obviously let go, given the reins in Washington, and under head coach Ron Rivera could not keep that starting job. So a lot of people are obviously going to hear the name Carson Wentz and they're going to cringe, right? Because the NFL is a what have you done for me lately league, and Carson Wentz has not been good. He didn't play well enough to hang on to that starting job in Washington. I know maybe there were some nagging injuries for him this year, and Indianapolis, the end of that season was painful. I think that year in Indy, he threw for 3,500 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, which on paper isn't a terrible, stat line to look at. But the way that they played down the stretch, especially that final game against Jacksonville, where I think it was win or go home.
Yeah, it was winning in.
Yeah, and he came out as flat as he had all year, so he's clearly not the guy that they needed to step up in that situation. But with all of that being said, at the end of the day, Carson Wentz checks all the criteria for what the Bucs are going to want in a veteran quarterback. He didn't win the Super Bowl with Philly. He was on that Super Bowl roster. He had a really big part in keeping that team successful in the early part of the regular season before his injury and Nick Foles came in. But he's kind of been there. He's been the guy for a couple of organizations. Has it always worked out? No, but he's had his highs and lows, and I do think he could be legitimate competition for Kyle Trask. What do you think of Carson Wentz?
It's a tough thing because when he's on, he's good. But when he's not, it's brutal. There really is no in between. That's the problem. And he's been prone to turnovers, not really interceptions, but the fumbles. His pocket awareness is not where it needs to be. I mean, he is one of the worst quarterbacks, I think, in the NFL, starting quarterbacks when it comes to pocket awareness. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I just think there's some that offer you a lot more upside, like a Baker Mayfield, or like I think Jacoby Brissett's a better option. And I would just at that point, like you would hope if you signed Wentz that Trask would take the job, I think, because there's more upside to be gained there than there is with Carson Wentz. He has the tools, big guy. He's got a strong arm. He's mobile. I mean, he can avoid tacklers and stuff. It's not like he's a statue back there. I mean, he is mobile enough. It's just that there's a lot of frustrations with him, and there's a reason that he's going to be on his fourth team in 4 years. Like there is a reason. He lasted 1 year in Indy after they trade a first round pick for him.
Yeah,
a first round pick for him, and they decided to cut him after one season, or try to say trade him. And now Washington's cutting him after one season. There's a reason for that. So I would personally stay away. I don't expect the Bucs to be involved there, but never say never, I guess.
Number 2 overall pick back in 2016. And, you've said this about other guys before, but with Carson Wentz, 7 years as a starter in the NFL, he's been around long enough to where you know what you're going to get. The talent is still there. The pros are still there. When he's on, but when he's bad, he is definitely one of the worst. And I think he's going to be looked at because the Bucs are obviously going to do due diligence, but Carson Wentz, he's going to be on the lower end of how we would rank these free agent quarterbacks based off of their ability, best available, things like that. But he's also going to be one of the cheapest options, in my opinion, because the guy desperately needs a job. Let's talk about another quarterback who was released today. This one actually within the division, and something that everyone saw coming, but something that would be pretty interesting when we talk about just the players in general who have worn a Buccaneers uniform over the last 3 or 4 seasons. This next one is...
It would be very funny.
Yeah, I know. It would be incredibly ironic. Marcus Mariota, the Atlanta Falcons officially released him earlier today. We know that, that kind of ended awkwardly at the tail end of the 2022 season between the two of them. And we also know that Marcus Mariota was just one pick away from becoming the Bucs' potential franchise quarterback. But of course, back in 2015, they took Jameis Winston, number 1 overall on that fateful day. And the rest is history. So with Marcus Mariota, again, he's been around long enough. I mean, been in the league longer than Carson Wentz, so the same conversation can be had. You kind of know what you're going to get. He's never going to be a guy who's going to move the needle as far as a quarterback position. He's not going to come in here and I guess shake up this quarterback room. And I do think he is a guy that Kyle Trask could potentially win the job from. But what do you make of Marcus Mariota, even if he's just a backup?
It would be interesting because not only all the storyline and stuff, but like the style of play he has is really not something that the Bucs have gone for mostly. I wouldn't say he's a scrambler type, but he has a lot of mobility, as we know, from watching a lot of him at Oregon, obviously with preparations for Tampa getting the top pick that year. And, then in Tennessee, his first career start, he gashed the Bucs, and the style that he plays with would be a change from what they've typically gone with. And maybe that style is something Dave Canales would want. Maybe, Geno Smith is kind of very similar. So, it wouldn't, again, it wouldn't shock me. I don't think that's likely. I could see, and this is the ironic part about Mariota, is I could see him ended up in Philly as the backup quarterback, which we all know Chip Kelly's obsession back in 2015 with landing him. Couldn't do it, obviously, but I could see him in the backup position there. But as far as in Tampa, I think there's other possibilities with probably better upside there.
Now, one more thing I wanted to talk about before we get to a couple of other candidates and some other things Jason Licht, Todd Bowles had spoke about today at the Combine. I wanted to ask you about this regarding the free agent quarterback situation. So you had said before on this podcast a couple of weeks ago that, at the end of the day, I know the Bucs still have an uphill battle against the cap, but as far as free agents go, free agent quarterbacks, maybe someone who the Bucs want, a guy like Jimmy G or Derek Carr, they could, at the cost of mortgaging some more pieces of the team towards the future, right? But with all of that being said, my question is, with Jason Licht saying what he said today, doubling down on Kyle Trask and kind of everyone seemingly pointing towards the idea that the Bucs are just going to go ahead and stick with a cheap veteran. Do you think the door is closing on them, sticking their neck out and going after a big name quarterback, or are we kind of getting away from that? Because I know there wasn't a strong chance at the start of the offseason, but I certainly feel like there's less of a chance they go and make a crazy move like that now.
Yeah, I do think that door is beginning to not slam shut completely, but I think it's beginning to close. I think it's at the early stages of closing. It just doesn't seem like that's something. And you see Light's comments and Bowles' comments today, and everything that you hear and stuff, and everything that you hear from the quarterbacks themselves about their Carr's market or Jimmy Garoppolo's market. It just doesn't seem like something that the Bucs would be willing to do. And yeah, and like you said, I mentioned, yeah, they can sign any free agent they want. Like, you can, if you really want a guy, you can find ways to get the guy, but it's all about that risk versus reward thing. And are you risking? Are you willing to risk, I should say, losing some talented players? Maybe not this year, but next year or the year after that or the year after that, over a guy who's not, Derek Carr's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. Like, is it worth it? Like, a guy like Tom Brady, sure. A guy like Lamar Jackson, sure. But that's, Lamar Jackson's not happening. So, like, in like a Jimmy Garoppolo, is it worth it to lose a potential, Antoine Winfield Jr. like, because you can't afford him, or is, so it's tough, and I think they're starting to realize that. And I do think that, yeah, that door. I think any Bucs fans sort of wanting Derek Carr or wanting a Jimmy Garoppolo are probably going to be disappointed, and they should probably start preparing themselves now for that possibility to not really exist.
Well, I know normally they leak the script a couple of weeks early. Maybe a couple of months before the season, we'll get the script for what it's going to look like in 2023. We got the script back in 2019, figured out Brady was going to be a Buck in March 2020. We all freaked out. So, if we get any updates on the 2023 NFL script and the Bucs, man, it drastically changed over the years. Like, I would say, the last 5-6 years, maybe 7 years, wrestlers, the WWE, the organizations themselves are far. Yeah. I wanted to talk a little more about what Jason Licht said today with the quarterback position, and he didn't rule out the Buccaneers drafting a new quarterback competitor for Kyle Trask in the early rounds of the 2023 NFL draft. So, with that being said, I know we talked a lot last week about potential college candidates. Of course, Anthony Richardson out of Florida going to be one of the top quarterback names linked to Tampa Bay. That's if they pick it number 19. Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, Will Levis from Kentucky, which seems like a great player, someone that I would like them to go after if they want to get aggressive and draft someone. But that's what I'm here to ask you about, is in a situation where the Buccaneers draft a quarterback, this year in particular, one, they have to really like the guy. And two, I think something not enough people are talking about is the fact that they're not the only team in the division looking for a quarterback. In fact, every single team in the NFC South, and I think a lot of teams in the AFC South, if I'm not mistaken, are looking for quarterbacks. I mean, there are, a lot of teams that are going to be floating around, maybe looking to make some moves. And with that being said, if the Bucs see a guy and they really like them, I think if they end up drafting a guy, they're going to have to be aggressive, and we're going to see them trade up and take the guy that they want. What do you think? You think a scenario where the Buccaneers draft a guy? To me, I don't think it's going to be at 19, especially when you got Carolina, New Orleans, and Atlanta all in the market for a quarterback. You're going to want to jump down and get in front of at least two of those teams to get your guy and make sure he's still on the board, right?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, and a lot of I should say, not a lot of quarterbacks to fill all those spots. So, when you talk about the draft, the thing about it, and they can have interest in Anthony Richardson or Will Levis or anybody, all they want. Yeah, like, you're not going to get those guys at 19. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm not a big fan of Will Levis. I like Anthony Richardson, but I'm not enough of an Anthony Richardson fan to be willing to move up for him, because you're going to have to move into probably at this rate, the top 6, because I mean, you got Vegas at 7. And if Vegas gets Aaron Rodgers, or they get a Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe that changes. But I think there's a chance they go. And then you got Carolina sitting, lost a bunch. So I do think they have an interest in Anthony Richardson. Rick Stroud put out an article a little bit earlier saying that the Bucs were going to keep a close eye on Anthony Richardson at the combine. And I just think that dude is going to blow up at the combine. Like, he's going to nail all the testing. Like, the combine is for the best athletes, and he is one of the best athletes in the draft. And I just think he's gonna show out. And I think by the end of that combine, I think he'll end up being drafted before Will Levis. I think he'll be the third quarterback off the board. So you're gonna have to get pretty high for a guy like that. And I don't think the Buccaneers, especially if next year, if 2023 goes south, that 2024 quarterback draft class is very strong. Caleb Williams, Drake May, among others that could potentially rise. I don't know if you want to, if you want to put all your eggs in one basket here in this class with such a stronger class potentially looming. So, and you have a lot of needs now. So you need every draft pick you should get. And I just don't think the Bucs are in a position to be able to trade up and mortgage some of their future for a guy like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, who I don't think either is a sure thing.
Well, and that's what they love to do every single year, right? I mean, this week of the combine, once you get ready for workouts, you start to see the more athletic players stick out in those position groups, where a guy like Anthony Richardson, who's probably not going to be QB1 on a lot of people's board, is going to immediately jump out because of that 40 time, because of the shuttle drill, because of, everything that he does well athletically really being put on display. And that's when people start to hype these guys up. And we've seen it happen time and time again. We refer to it as the Kenny Bell effect among Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans, right? Where you watch a guy run around in a short and t-shirt and he looks great. He looks awesome. He looks like, the next greatest player that your team is about to get. And, sometimes that doesn't always end up being the case. And I hate to come down on Anthony Richardson like that, because I've made it known that I'm not the biggest fan of him coming into the draft this year. I thought maybe another year at Florida would have done him wonders, but that's clearly not what he wanted. And, it is what it is. But there's a lot of other guys in this draft that are really going to jump out. And, it's going to be interesting to see how aggressive the Bucs are going to be. But just like you said, you're already kind of paying for what happened. Obviously, the cap situation with Tom Brady filing his retirement paperwork the way that he did. And then, the full $35 million hitting you this year, you're $55 million over the cap. I know that they just cut Donovan Smith and Leonard Fournette, but there's also a report being floated out, but that was done, not just to save money, but just because of subpar play as well, factoring into that.
No, for sure. If they played well, the Bucs would have found a way to keep them.
Yeah.
Like, if you're worth it, like that's why the Bucs aren't going to be cutting some other guys that they could, to save money. If you're worth it, they're not going to cut you because they're still trying to win. I mean, it's a transition year. They're not rebuilding. Like this is not a rebuild.
Yeah. And it's incredibly risky for Jason Licht, of all people, to go out here and make a move on a quarterback in the draft this year, because if you come away with a quarterback in the first round, even if he's there at 19, that's an aggressive move. But to trade up, your expectations for what this guy can become are sky high, and you're also bringing him in to potentially be quarterback competition for Kyle Trask, who Jason Licht said today was drafted as a second-round pick for a reason. So it's like, what kind of message are you sending at that point? But again, also, I still think it is something that we could consider. Maybe there is a guy they like this year where they want to get that aggressive. It's a big risk, but I definitely don't think it's impossible.
Yeah. So, and my thing is, like, I like Anthony Richardson, but I don't think Anthony Richardson is a guy that's going to be thrown in day one and be a starter. Like, that's not how he's going to find success. He needs a year. He might need 2 years. Who knows? I mean, I think he has all the potential in the world. I think he might have the highest potential out of any quarterback in this entire draft class. But potential is different than readiness, and potential is dangerous. I mean, it is very dangerous, and it's not going to be it's not going to be easy to sit there and move up for a guy, move up many spots for a guy, give up a ton of draft capital, and then not have that guy start year one. Like, that's tough. So I do think that and you talk about when Jason Licht would draft him, and there's two ends of this, I think. One would be if Jason Licht drafts a quarterback, that may actually sort of buy him 2 years or so. Right? Maybe, because like, it might be like, if the Glazers want to fire him, it'd be like, look, like, we got this first round quarterback. Let's see how he does first, So it may buy him some time. At the same time, does Jason Licht want to really draft someone that he may never even see play when he's the GM? Like, draft Anthony Richardson, things go south, the Glazers decide to move on. All of a sudden, a new GM's coming in with the guy that you drafted, you scouted and you drafted, and so I think there's two ends of that spectrum there. One that could buy him a little bit of leeway, and another that could really ramp up the pressure on him to get it right. He's already gotten a number one overall pick quarterback, not on the roster anymore, so didn't win the Super Bowl with that guy. You would think that the Bucs won the 2020 Super Bowl, and you would think that, okay, Jameis Winston was their quarterback. That's how it's supposed to go, right? You draft the guy number one overall, and 5 years later, he wins you a championship. No, that's not how it works. So I think if you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, specifically trading up for one, which I think you're going to have to do, you need to be sure to hit. And I just don't think there's enough sure things there. I mean, no thing's a sure thing, but I don't think there's enough there in either Richardson or Levis to do that move and feel confident about it. Now, the reason we aren't talking about the other two, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, is that would take a ginormous package, because you're talking about probably having to get into the top three at that point, probably maybe even top two, to land one of those guys, and that's just not. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know a world where the Buccaneers have enough assets to pull that type of deal off. So that's why we haven't really talked about either of those two, because it's, kind of the 1 and 2, not really likely, but the quarterbacks 3 and 4, maybe, So I don't think it's going to happen. Would it shock me? I would be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked. Just because, and they typically, Jason Licht loves the draft, and you're talking about giving up your 2024 first round pick as well in a year where there's no guarantee you're going to be that good. Like, that could be a top 10 pick. So I don't think it's worth the risk.
On the topic of the NFL draft and what the Bucs could potentially do with that first round pick, I've been looking at a lot of mock drafts, just like many people have this year. And I'll be honest with you, something that I have not seen a lot of is people picking the Bucs to take an offensive lineman in the first round. I mean, I've seen a lot of offensive help. I've seen everything from a quarterback like Anthony Richardson to a wide receiver to, some defensive help to fill in some of the gaps along the defensive line. But you would think maybe the offensive line position would be more of a talking point, and maybe it will, in the weeks after this because of the official news of Donovan Smith being released by Tampa Bay. But have you noticed that as well? Like, are you surprised that there is a lack of people expecting the Bucs to try and make a move on an offensive lineman here?
No, here's the thing, and actually, when I wanted to talk about this a little bit, Pewter Report in their article that said, Donovan Smith expected to be released and stuff, mentioned that the Bucs might consider moving Tristan Wirfs to left tackle, which we've talked about a little bit. And I've sort of, poured cold water on the idea, but maybe like it's possible. I didn't say it's not going to happen. It's just, I just don't think it's
experience at right tackle. I mean,
I know. I know. I'm just saying.
Jason Licht also said today he expects Logan Hall and Luke Gedeke to make massive strides in the following season.
It's just not.
I mean,
it's just not.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
You done?
Yeah. I didn't want to be dramatic. Sorry.
No, you did a good job of not being dramatic. Yeah. So it's not Madden, like it's not like so simple to move a guy from the right to the left side. So could it happen? Sure. And if Tristan Wirfs is an all-pro left tackle, you got something there. And I mean, his contract was already going to be ridiculous at right tackle. Imagine if he plays well at left tackle, that's going to be insane. But, I don't think it's going to rule them out of drafting a left tackle. I think that may depend on, I think sort of their, break glass emergency might be try Tristan Wirfs a left tackle. If they can't land a guy they like enough in free agency to compete for a starting job, or they can't land a guy at 19 or in the second round or the third round to compete for that job. I mean, you remember Donovan Smith himself was a second round pick, was a day one starter for this team. So you can find a day one starting left tackle in the second round there. So I do think that they're going to look. Now, I mean, there's a few guys, Broderick Jones from Georgia, not positive he's going to be there. I don't think Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronski, the top two tackles, I don't believe they're going to be at 19. So, I mean, I could see it, but I do think, honestly, in the first round at this point, with all the free agents they have on that particular side of the ball, I think a defensive player is I'm not sure of the position. It could be safety, corner, edge rusher, even linebacker. But I just think the most likely option is them going to go the defensive player route, just because they have so many free agents on that side of the ball. And I just think they need to spend some resources there.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too, because we spoke a lot about how they need to just get younger, like point blank period, on that defensive line. The free agents they brought in last year clearly didn't help as much as they needed to. Guys like Akeem Hicks were there, they were present, but he wasn't as game changing as they wanted him to be, and maybe that old age had something to do with it. The guys that they had moved on from before, simply because of age. And I think that's what a lot of it's going to boil down to. So they've needed to get younger on defense for a couple of years now, and I think that is more likely to be something that starts in the first round of the draft. But on the offensive side of the ball, in the trenches, it's funny because we haven't had that conversation as much. There's a lot of young guys back there. Like Robert Hainsey got a lot of playing time, but he's still a young guy. Luke Gedeke is still a young guy. Nick Leverett, a relatively young guy. And then obviously Aaron Stinney may or may not be back in the mix next year for Tampa Bay. We'll have that conversation when the time comes. But let me ask you one more thing. And, this has to do with cap casualties. This has to do with some guys that may or may not be released. It's a name we've already mentioned before on the show. Leonard Fournette, Donovan Smith already moving on. Russell Gage, who is currently signed to a 3-year deal with Tampa Bay, 2 years left, and I think he averages about $10 million a year on that contract. Jason Licht said today at the Combine that Russell Gage struggled last year due to injuries, and kind of echoed a lot of what we said throughout the year, or at least a lot of what I said throughout the year, because I'm still a big fan in Russell Gage. I know he didn't give me a ton of reason to be throughout last season. I spoke highly of him in the final few weeks of the year, but I think what Jason Licht said today might have some people, second guessing on if the Bucs are just going to cut bait with Russell Gage, because it's a big contract and they can save some money, and he is a candidate. But just like with cutting any other player on this team right now, you're going to have to find a replacement, and for the price that they're paying, what the market's going to be when it's time to pay for another one, I don't know if there's any other more practical options who are just as good as Russell Gage, for wide receiver 3 floating around.
Well, and also by cutting him, you're saving a little bit over $2 million. It's not like you're saving a crap ton of money. So I just don't know if it's worth it. Like, if you were saving, like, okay, $10 million, he signed for 10 a year or so, you were saving $8 million by cutting him. Okay, maybe, like, sure, that might make sense, but is it really worth it? Like, just as, maybe what if he comes back healthy? Like, he was a productive player in Atlanta. Like, he really was. If he comes back healthy and plays well for you next year, like, I just, like you said, I don't know if you're going to be able to find a wide receiver 3 that's going to be as productive as him, especially when the cap savings that you would have is minimal. So, it's not, you're opening up another hole. You need a wide receiver 3 in today's NFL. You just do. In today's NFL, the passing league it is, you need a wide receiver 3. And I don't know if you want to open up yet another hole that you have to fill. So, the draft class at wide receiver is not great. It's not as good as it has been in years past. I know people have sort of gotten used to the idea of, the wide receiver draft classes are just insane. It's fine this year, but it's not like it has been in years past. Like, I don't know if you can find really good guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round like you have in years past. And the free agent wide receiver class is not good. So, like, I think your best bet would be to just keep Russell Gage and see if he can improve. If he doesn't, sure, then next offseason he's gone. But if he does, then you have 3 really good options there for whoever your quarterback is. So I see more benefits in keeping him than cutting him.
And we'll wrap it up with this quarterback talk here. We got someone in the chat mentioning the possibility of Jimmy G at quarterback for Tampa Bay in 2023. Listen, not to tease you guys too much or anything, but the next time we talk to you here on the podcast, we are actually going to deep dive into why exactly the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should stay away from Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll use some talking points from an article on BucsNation.com written by the Philly Bucs fan himself, Mr. Evan Wanish. But one more question for you before we wrap this show up. The title of the episode here on YouTube is Who's the Next Tampa Bay Buccaneers Quarterback? And I want to ask you that same question. If you have to predict the week 1 starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2023, whether they draft a guy, whether they sign a veteran, or whether it's Kyle effing Trask, who do you think it's going to be?
I don't think it's going to be Kyle Trask. Okay, I'm going to take the cop-out answer. I'm going to say it's going to be one of 2 names. It's going to be Jacoby Brissett or Baker Mayfield. If I had to guess, I think it's going to be one of those guys. I know, obviously, Bruce Arians still in the building. Bruce Arians is a pretty big fan of Baker Mayfield, so I know Bruce spoke glowingly of Kyle Trask as well, but yet again, I need to remind everybody he is the only quarterback under contract right now. So, yeah, I think it's gonna be one of them too. If it's not though, like if it's not one of those 2, I would personally just rather roll a Trask, I guess. And see what you have there. Like if you're gonna sign Drew Lock, like that's fine, but like, like I don't want Drew Lock to be the starter. And if Drew Lock does win the starting job, that means Kyle Trask is not very good. So, yeah, I think it's gonna be one of them too. I think they're gonna aim a little bit higher. Because I think jobs are on the line here. And I just think they know they need to be competitive. And I think they're going to look at a wide open NFC South right now and think that they can be. So I think it's going to be one of them too. But if it's not, then I will say I think Kyle Trask is the third likeliest option on that point.
All right. Well, I have two separate answers. I'm only going to give you one.
And that could change. We're about 3 weeks away from free agency. I mean, a lot can change.
Yeah. So my heart's answer is different than my brain's answer. And I'll give you my brain's answer first. My brain's answer is Kyle Trask. Maybe it's because I have confidence in him to win the starting job. And maybe it's because I know that there's a couple of people on this Buccaneers coaching staff who are just chomping at the bit to actually see if this guy is about it. So with that being said, I do think the Buccaneers signed some competition. Is it the best free agent quarterback? I don't think so. But I think they bring someone in, and I think Trask wins the job. Now, my heart, you already know what my heart says. My heart says that Minshew Mania rolls into Tampa Bay and runs wild on you, brother. And unfortunately, I just don't think that's going to happen. I do think Minshew's a free agent target for the Bucs, but it seems
I could see them having interest.
It just doesn't seem like something they would do. One, because they love to spite me. Whenever I really like a player and want to see them in a Bucs uniform, they usually try their best to make sure that doesn't happen. But two, I don't know. I guess I'm just going to fall back on my intuition on this one. I don't know. I guess it just boils down to I never get what I want. So with that being said, my prediction is Kyle Trask. Your prediction is Baker Mayfield. Should we say Baker Mayfield's your number one prediction?
Jacoby Brissett.
Okay, Brissett over Mayfield.
Yeah, if I had to choose one of them, yeah.
I would agree with you. I would go Brissett over Mayfield as well. But ladies and gentlemen, drop your predictions in the chat, and we will wrap back up with those. But before we let you go, follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news, as it happens, not only can you listen to the Cannon Fire Podcast like you did today, but you can also check out my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_Daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What have you got this week?
Well, I covered the Donovan Smith release this morning, and I'm going to be looking at some of the Bucs free agent priorities. I sort of mentioned it last week too, I think, but I'm going to be just ranking their priorities for who they have to re-sign. Not saying they're going to re-sign all of them, just who I think should be their priorities in order. So keep an eye out for that.
All right. Should be good. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. A bold prediction here in the live chat. David Cardona says Evan Wanish will be the 2023 Buccaneers quarterback one. You heard it here first. That would be groundbreaking.
Look, I can neither confirm nor deny. So, I got to keep all that. We'll see come March 15th, I guess, right?
I mean, you certainly wouldn't be the first Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback in history with a podcast, but you would be the first podcaster in history who played quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, huh?
Yeah, I would be making history. So, like I said, I can't confirm nor deny. So maybe there's a reason I want Russell Gage on a team. Maybe I just, I don't want to be thrown to a bum or something. I don't know.
There you go. Buck Skull Gang in the house says, I think Baker could be the one. Willie Beeman says, I think Baker Mayfield is complete garbage. He gets us an automatic 2024 top 10 pick. If the
Bucs how you really feel, Willie.
Yeah, I mean, Willie really laying it down, letting you know. Bucs Nation 31 brings up Derek Carr, but honestly, I think that ship has sailed, my friend. We mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you never know. Like we said, the Bucs could get any free agent they want. I guess we'll just see how aggressive they decide to get with free agency looming and a couple of other releases yet to be made. We'll keep you guys posted along every step of the way. Keep it locked right here. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you so much for listening, and go Bucs.